My name was Ana Walshe. I was 39 years old. I was a mother of 3 little boys. I was a professional who had built her career from nothing in a country that was not born mine. I was an immigrant who turned ambition into a life, a woman who crossed an ocean to find herself, and who for a long time believed she had. I had a title. I had a salary. I had a beautiful house by the sea in Cohasset, Massachusetts, a postcard of a life that looked perfect from the outside. And I was trying, every single day, to make it real. But behind the doors of that house, something was rotting. Not the walls, not the wood, the marriage. On the night of December 31st, 2022, I sat at my dinner table with my husband and a friend, and I welcomed what I believed would be a new year. I tried to call my mother. I tried to call my sister. I tried to call my godmother. No one answered. That was the last time I tried to reach the people who loved me most. I was last seen in the early hours of January 1st, 2023. I never boarded a plane. I never arrived in Washington. I never came home. What happened to me was brutal. What happened to me was planned. And for too long, the man who did it tried to make the world believe I had simply disappeared. I am here now to tell you what really happened. This is my story. This is her final story. I was born Ana Lubicic in 1983 in Belgrade, the capital of what was then Yugoslavia, a country that would later fracture into pieces, like so many things in my life. I grew up speaking Serbian, loving the French language, and dreaming of something bigger. Not because Belgrade was not enough. It was full of history, of culture, of people I loved. But there is a kind of restlessness that lives inside certain women, a hunger that doesn't quiet down no matter how much you feed it. That was me. I was always reaching forward. I studied French language and literature at the University of Belgrade. Languages were my door, my way of connecting to worlds beyond my own. I was good with people. I could walk into a room and make it feel warmer. My sister Alexandra would tell you that. My mother would tell you that. They knew me before the world tried to define me. In 2005, I made the leap. I immigrated to the United States, a country I knew mostly through films and dreams, and the careful optimism of someone who has studied hard and believes in the power of work. I arrived with my French, my Serbian stubbornness, and the kind of ambition that people either admire or fear in a woman. I started in hospitality, the way many immigrants do, in the places where elegance is required and labor is invisible. I worked at the Wheatley Hotel in Lenox, Massachusetts, a luxury property tucked inside the Berkshire Hills. It was there, in that world of refined interiors and high expectations, that I first learned what I was capable of. I could manage. I could lead. I could make people feel cared for and important. These were not small skills. It was also in that world where I believe I first encountered Ana Walshe. Around 2008, our paths crossed in the way that paths cross when you are young and ambitious and moving through circles that overlap. He was charming in the way that certain people are charming, completely, effortlessly, in a way that makes you feel chosen. And I, a woman building herself in a new country, was not immune to that feeling. I became a United States citizen. I built a career that most people would consider extraordinary. By 2022, I was the regional general manager of Tishman Speyer, one of the most prestigious commercial real estate firms in the world. I split my weeks between Washington, D.C., where the company had major operations, and our home in Cohasset, Massachusetts, where our family lived. Cohasset. If you have never been there, imagine a coastal suburb south of Boston, where the houses sit on rocky cliffs above the Atlantic Ocean, where the streets are lined with old trees, and where the median household income suggests that difficulty is something that happens somewhere else. It is the kind of place where problems are supposed to be invisible. Brian and I married in 2016. By 2022, we had 3 sons, ages 2, 4, and 6. They were everything. Anyone who knew me would tell you that. They were the reason I worked so hard, the reason I kept pushing, the reason I stayed in situations that I should perhaps have left sooner. I was described by the people who loved me as optimistic, ambitious, warm, someone who lit up a room. My colleagues respected me. My friends relied on me. I was the kind of woman who tried to hold everything together. The career, the family, the marriage, even when everything was beginning to pull apart. Because it was pulling apart. Not all at once. Not in any single dramatic moment. But slowly, the way marriages sometimes do when one person is growing and the other is shrinking. When one person is building a life and the other is watching their world collapse. Ana Walshe had been, for years, living inside a fiction of his own making. He presented himself as an artist, a gallery owner, a man of culture and taste. He had once sold artworks. He had once moved in certain circles. But by the time I disappeared, he had already pleaded guilty to federal fraud charges. He had sold fake Andy Warhol paintings through my eBay account, deceiving buyers out of tens of thousands of dollars. He owed hundreds of thousands of dollars in restitution. He was under federal home detention, monitored by GPS, restricted from leaving the house except for approved errands. The man I had married, the father of my children. I want you to hold that picture in your mind. A woman rising, a man falling, and a house that looked perfect from the outside while the foundation cracked beneath our feet. I was trying to find my way out. I was trying, quietly, carefully, the way women in complicated situations often have to try. Not in one dramatic exit, but in small moves toward a future I was building without yet saying out loud. I spent Thanksgiving of 2022 in Ireland with someone else, a man named William. For the first time in a long time, I felt like myself. Brian knew, or suspected. He had hired a private investigator to follow me. The woman who had crossed an ocean to find her life was about to lose it. Not because she had done anything wrong, but because the man she was leaving could not allow her to leave. There are men who are dangerous in the obvious ways. They shout, they hit. They make their violence visible so that everyone around them can see it and name it. Ana Walshe was not that kind of man. Brian was the kind of danger that hides inside charm, inside helplessness, inside the appearance of being a devoted husband and father. The kind of danger that is harder to explain to people who haven't lived it. The kind that leaves you second-guessing your own perception of reality, asking yourself, am I overreacting? Is this really so bad? He loves me. He needs me. Doesn't he? To the outside world, Brian could seem devoted. He attended school events. He posted about our family. There was a surface, always a surface, of the perfect life, the handsome husband, the beautiful children. And surface is powerful. Surface is what people remember. Surface is what protects the wrong people. But underneath that surface was something else entirely. Brian's history of deception predated our marriage by years. The fraud case, the one that put him under house arrest, the one that humiliated our family, the one that he had committed using my own eBay account, in my name, was not a one-time error in judgment. It was a pattern. It was the behavior of a man who believed the rules did not apply to him, who moved through life manipulating what others believed to be true. Investigators would later describe the Warhol scheme as sophisticated and deliberate. Brian obtained what he claimed were authentic paintings, sold them for significant sums, and when confronted, deflected, delayed, and lied. He had done it in business. Prosecutors would argue he would do it again in marriage. According to testimony presented at his trial in December 2025, Brian had become obsessively suspicious about my movements, particularly after I began spending more time in Washington, D.C. Friends who testified described how he would question me about my fidelity, about whether I still loved him, about where I had been and who I had been with. This surveillance extended beyond conversations. Brian hired a private investigator to monitor my activities. He knew about William Fasto. According to testimony from William himself during the trial, our relationship had lasted approximately a year. I was not hiding from my marriage. I was finding my way out of it. And I believe Brian understood that. The financial dimension of our situation is critical to understanding what was building in that house. Brian owed $475,000 in restitution to the victims of his art fraud. Under the terms of his home detention, his freedom was already severely restricted. A divorce would not simply be an emotional rupture. It could affect his legal arrangements, his access to our assets, his ability to maintain any semblance of the life he had constructed. I had a life insurance policy. According to testimony from an insurance executive at trial, Brian was the sole beneficiary of a policy worth $1 million. Investigators believed the total value of assets and insurance Brian stood to inherit could reach $2.7 million. I also held property in my own name. A condominium in Revere had recently sold. I was the one earning, the one building, the one moving forward. Think about what that means. I was the door out of everything Brian was drowning in. If I stayed, he could use my income and my assets to sustain his fiction a little longer. If I left, if I took my earnings, my children, my future, he had nothing. The man who had spent his life constructing illusions would be left with only the reality of what he actually was. A convicted fraudster, alone, in debt, with no one left to deceive. People who knew Brian described him in words that appeared in various press reports and testimonies: sociopathic tendencies, emotional manipulation, an inability to accept responsibility. Whether or not those clinical labels are exact, the behavior pattern they describe is recognizable. It is the behavior of someone who experiences other people not as human beings with their own inner lives, but as resources to be managed. I had been his resource for years. I had carried the family. I had maintained the image. I had tolerated the fraud, the embarrassment, the house arrest, the GPS monitor on his ankle. And now I was leaving. I want you to understand that what happened to me did not begin on New Year's Eve. It began in all the moments before that. In the suspicious questions, in the private investigator, in the financial desperation, in a man watching the only thing that held his world together begin to walk away. The warning signs were there. They are always there. But they are so often wrapped in love, in history, in children, in the terrible ordinary weight of a shared life, that it can be almost impossible to see them for what they are until it is too late. I did not see them in time. Or perhaps I saw them and believed I still had time to get out safely. I did not. December 31st, 2022, Cohasset, Massachusetts. The last evening of a year that had been full of change, full of quiet decisions, new relationships, growing distance, private plans. I had spent Thanksgiving in Ireland. I had been building slowly the pieces of a future that did not include Brian, not yet publicly. But inside me, the decision was solidifying. That night, Brian and I had dinner at home with a friend. A normal evening on the surface. The kind of evening that blends into memory without edges, without drama. There was food, there was conversation, there was the ritual countdown of another year ending. Around midnight, and then again around 1 in the morning, I tried to call the people I loved most in the world. My mother, my sister Alexandra, my godmother. I tried to reach them across the ocean, to hear their voices at the turn of the year. No one answered. I did not know those would be my last attempts to reach them. Investigators would later establish that I was last seen alive at approximately 4 in the morning on January 1st, 2023. What happened in that house in the hours before dawn, in the dark and cold of a New England winter, has never been fully reconstructed because the man who knows has never told the truth. What we know is this: by the time the sun rose on New Year's Day, I was gone. Brian's story, the one he told investigators when they first came asking, was that I had received an emergency call from my employer, that I had packed quickly and left early in the morning to catch a flight to Washington, D.C. He said I had called an Uber or a Lyft to take me to Logan Airport. No Uber was ever dispatched. No Lyft was ever ordered. No record of any transportation service arriving at our home that morning was ever found. My cell phone, the device that is, in modern life, the closest thing to a person's shadow, gave its last signal near our home. It went dark. I never checked in for a flight. My luggage was never found at the airport. The colleagues who were supposedly expecting me in Washington had no record of any emergency that would have required my presence on a holiday morning. The story Brian had told was built on nothing. It was a fiction constructed with the same practiced ease as the Warhol scheme, the same confidence in his own ability to make people believe what he needed them to believe. But this time, the stakes were not thousands of dollars. This time, the stakes were my life. I want to tell you about the hours that followed, not from my own experience, because I can no longer speak of that directly, but from what the investigation would reveal, piece by piece, in the days and weeks and months that came after. At 4:55 in the morning of January 1st, 2023, a search was entered on the internet browser of an iPad that belonged to one of my sons. A child's device. My child's device. The search read, "How long before a body starts to smell?" 4 minutes later, another search. "How to stop a body from decomposing?" At 5:20 a.m., "How to embalm a body?" At 5:47 a.m., 10 ways to dispose of a dead body if you really had to. At 6:25 a.m., how long does a person have to be missing to inherit? At 6:34 a.m., can you throw away body parts? At 11:34 a.m., as the first light of the new year moved across Massachusetts, dismemberment, best ways to dispose of a body. At 11:44 a.m., how to remove blood from a hardwood floor. At 11:56 a.m., luminol, does it detect blood? He used my son's iPad to research how to destroy me, my child's device, the device that sat in small hands and played cartoons and held photographs of our family. I want you to sit with that for a moment. Not because I want you to feel horror for its own sake, but because that detail, more than almost any other, reveals what Brian Walshe truly was. A man who did not have the capacity to feel what he should have felt. Not grief, not panic, not the shattering that comes when a human life has ended. Only logistics, only the next step, only the problem to be managed. In the days that followed, he continued. On January 2nd, surveillance cameras captured him at a Home Depot store in Rockland, wearing a black surgical mask and blue gloves. He purchased approximately $450 worth of supplies in cash: tarps, mops, buckets, tape, cleaning materials. On subsequent days, cameras recorded him at a Lowe's and other stores. He bought a hacksaw, a hatchet, more cleaning supplies. He was filmed carrying heavy garbage bags to dumpsters, at an apartment complex in Abington, at locations near his mother's home in Swampscott. He did not report me missing until January 4th, 2023, 3 full days after I was gone. The search queries continued in the days that followed. Hacksaw, best tool for dismembering? Can a body be identified from broken teeth? What happens to hair on a dead body? This is what happened after the last dinner, after the last midnight, after the last phone calls that no one answered. I was 39 years old. I was building a new life. I had 3 little boys sleeping upstairs, and the man I had married was using our son's iPad to learn how to make me disappear. When I did not show up for work, when my employer, not my husband, noticed first that something was wrong, the wheels of the investigation began to turn. On January 4th, 2023, Tishman Speyer reached out. My colleagues, concerned by my absence, reported that I had not arrived as expected. Brian, perhaps sensing that the window for his fiction was closing, also reported me missing that same day. He told investigators the same story he had constructed from the beginning: the emergency call, the early morning departure, the Uber to the airport. The Cohasset Police Department and the Massachusetts State Police began their investigation. What they found, even in the first days, was a story riddled with holes. There was no transportation record, no flight record. No one in Washington, D.C. who could confirm my arrival or even my expected presence. My phone was silent, its last signal a ghost near our own address. And Brian's own movements during the previous 3 days, his purchases, his routes, his behavior, had been recorded by the surveillance systems that are now woven invisibly into the fabric of American life. Store cameras, parking lot cameras, residential security systems, the digital breadcrumbs left by a man who believed he was careful, but was not careful enough. On January 8, 2023, Brian Walshe was arrested, not yet for murder, but for lying to investigators. He had told them he had stayed home on January 2nd, that he had not left the house, that his movements had been unremarkable. The surveillance footage from the Home Depot told a different story. The investigation deepened. Officers searched our home in Cohasset. In the basement, they found what they were dreading: blood on the hardwood floor. A knife, damaged, stained, hidden in a kitchen cabinet, its blade testing positive for blood. A rug, soaked. Evidence of a frantic and violent attempt at cleaning that had not, in the end, cleaned everything. The basement of our beautiful seaside home was where it had happened, where the man who called himself my husband had done what the search queries on my son's iPad had been preparing him to do. But Brian had not stopped there. Investigators traced his routes in the days following my disappearance, following the GPS signal from his ankle monitor, the very device meant to restrict his movement. They tracked him to dumpsters, to waste transfer stations, to locations along the north shore of Massachusetts, in the towns of Abington and Peabody and Swampscott, where his mother lived. A massive operation began to sift through the garbage of those locations before it could be processed further and destroyed. It was painstaking, harrowing work, but it was necessary. Because piece by piece, investigators were recovering what was left of me. From garbage bags, from dumpsters, from a waste processing facility in Peabody, the following items were recovered: a Tyvek protective suit, the kind worn in industrial cleaning or crime scene remediation, stained with blood; a hacksaw, its blade carrying blood and DNA; a hatchet, its head and handle coated with blood, with a substance consistent with human adipose tissue, fat, embedded in the metal, as if it had been used to cut through a human body; bloodied towels, cut pieces of carpet, matching the rug that had been removed from our home; a Prada bag that had been mine; the boots I had worn to dinner on New Year's Eve; my COVID-19 vaccination card; and fragments of tissue, hair, things I will not describe in more detail, because they deserve the dignity of not being cataloged here like evidence in a warehouse. Forensic scientists from the Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab worked through those items with meticulous care. The DNA analysis, presented in extraordinary detail during the trial, was unambiguous. The blood on the hacksaw, mine. The DNA on the hatchet blade, mine. The material in the Tyvek suit, mine and Brian's, together. The stained carpet fragments, the hair, the tissue, all pointing to the same undeniable conclusion. Brian Walshe had killed me. He had dismembered my body in the basement of our home. He had packed me into garbage bags and distributed me across multiple waste sites, hoping that the industrial machinery of trash collection would complete the destruction he had begun. He was wrong. On January 18, 2023, Brian was formally charged with murder and improper disposal of a human body. Prosecutors announced what the evidence had already made clear. Ana Walshe was presumed dead. My family, already suffering across an ocean in Serbia, now had to absorb the weight of what that word meant. Presumed, not confirmed, not with a body to hold, not with a funeral to plan. Presumed. My mother, my sister Alexandra, the people who had answered my calls 1,000 times before the one night I needed them to answer, and couldn't. In the weeks and months that followed, detectives continued to piece together the full picture. They discovered Brian had hired a private investigator to monitor me before my death. They found the insurance documents. They spoke to William Fasto, who testified about our relationship, and confirmed that I had been working toward a future that did not include Brian. The investigation revealed a premeditation that was chilling in its clarity. The Google searches began within hours of my death, before most people would have had breakfast on New Year's Day. The supplies were purchased within 36 hours. The disposal route was mapped and executed methodically. This was not a man in shock. This was not a man processing an unexpected tragedy. This was a plan. My 3 boys, 6, 4, and 2 years old, were taken into the care of the Massachusetts Department of Children and Families. Their father was in prison. Their mother was gone. They were placed with relatives, their identities protected, their futures uncertain. The most innocent victims of all of this were barely old enough to understand what had happened. The trial of Brian Walshe began in early December 2025 at Norfolk Superior Court in Dedham, Massachusetts. Nearly 3 years had passed since New Year's Eve of 2022. 3 years of legal proceedings, of pre-trial hearings, of evidence gathering, of a family suspended in a grief that had no ending because there was no body to bury, no grave to visit, no place to put the weight of their mourning. In November 2025, just before the trial began, Brian made a calculated legal move. He pleaded guilty to the charges of deceiving police investigators and of improper transportation of human remains. He admitted, in those guilty pleas, that he had dismembered my body and disposed of it. But he did not plead guilty to murder. He maintained, through his attorneys, that I had died naturally in my sleep, that he had found me already dead, and that in a state of panic, fearing that his legal history would make him an automatic suspect, he had done what he did to the body. It was the last lie, and it did not hold. The prosecution, led by prosecutors Ann Yass and Gregory Connor, presented a case that did not require a single piece of direct physical evidence of the moment of death. They did not need a murder weapon. They did not need a complete body. They did not need a witness who had seen Brian kill me. They had something arguably more powerful, Brian's own digital record of his state of mind. The jury heard the full timeline of the Google searches, those entries made on my son's iPad beginning at 4:55 in the morning of January 1st, 2023. They heard the forensic digital experts explain how those searches were logged, when they were entered, and what their sequence revealed. The searches did not ask, "Should I call 911?" They did not ask, "What do I do if I find my wife unconscious?" They asked how long before a body smells. They asked about the best tool for dismemberment. They asked whether a body could be identified from broken teeth. Those are not the questions of a man who found his wife dead in her sleep and panicked. Those are the questions of a man who had already made his decision and was now managing the execution of it. The prosecution also called William Fastow, who described his relationship with me in detail. He testified about my plans, my state of mind, my desire for a future that was separate from Brian. A financial expert testified about the insurance policies and the value of the assets Brian stood to inherit. Investigators testified about the surveillance footage, the GPS tracking, the purchase receipts, the physical evidence recovered from the dumpsters and the waste processing facility. Forensic DNA scientists presented results so statistically overwhelming, probabilities expressed in quintillions, in non-illions, the largest numbers most people will never hear in their daily lives, that there was no reasonable scientific challenge to be made. The defense called no witnesses. This was understood, by legal observers and journalists who covered the trial, as a concession to the strength of what the prosecution had built. There was no credible counter-narrative. There was no expert who could explain away the searches. There was no witness who could place Brian anywhere else on the morning of January 1st. The defense's only argument was absence of direct proof of the killing itself, and the jury was not persuaded. Brian Walshe had also planned to take the stand in his own defense, according to pre-trial statements from his legal team. In the final days of the trial, he reversed that decision and remained silent. The man who had spent his life constructing stories for others to believe had nothing left to say. On December 15, 2025, The jury returned after deliberating for fewer than 6 hours across 2 days. Guilty. Murder in the first degree. Unanimous. Brian Walshe heard the verdict without visible emotion. He sat in the same stillness he had maintained throughout the proceedings, the same blank surface that had once passed for composure and now looked like what it probably always had been, the absence of the feelings that the rest of us carry. 3 days later, on December 18, 2025, Judge Diane Frenier delivered the sentence. Life in prison without the possibility of parole, mandatory under Massachusetts law for first-degree murder conviction. Additional consecutive sentences of 19 to 20 years for deceiving investigators and 2 to 3 years for improper disposal of human remains. The judge credited Brian for the roughly 1,000 days already served since his arrest. Judge Frenier did not deliver the sentence without words. She said what needed to be said. She called the crime barbaric and incomprehensible. She condemned what she described as Brian's deceptive and manipulative behavior. She told him directly that he would carry the guilt and burden of my death for the rest of his life. And then my sister spoke. Alexandra Dmitrievich stood in that courtroom and read her victim impact statement aloud. She spoke of an unbearable void. She spoke of a life unjustly taken. She spoke of children growing up without their mother. She spoke of a family, a mother in Serbia, a sister, a network of people who had loved me, shattered by a grief that has no ceremony to contain it. There is no grave for my family to visit. There is no final resting place. My body was disposed of like refuse, and not all of it was ever recovered. Alexandra spoke for all of them. She spoke in some ways for me. Brian Walshe will spend the rest of his natural life in a Massachusetts state prison. He will not be released. He will not negotiate a deal. He will not find a way to construct one more story that sets him free. The man who thought he could make me disappear is the one who disappeared instead. From the world, from his children's lives, from any possibility of the future he tried to purchase with my death. My life ended in Cohasset, Massachusetts, in the earliest hours of 2023. I was 39 years old. I had 3 children. I had a career I had built from nothing, in a country that was not born mine, through years of work and belief and refusal to stop reaching. He tried to erase me. He tried to scatter what remained of me across the garbage systems of a state that should have felt like home. He tried to make the world believe I had simply gotten on a plane and never come back. But I am still here. I am here in the testimony of the people who loved me. I am here in the verdict of 12 people who listened to the evidence and refused to look away from the truth. I am here in the words my sister found the courage to speak in that courtroom, even when the grief of speaking them must have been almost unbearable. If my story teaches anything, let it be this. Control does not always look like a raised hand. It can look like questions. It can look like a private investigator hired without your knowledge. It can look like financial dependence constructed so carefully that leaving seems impossible. It can wear the face of a loving husband and stand behind a beautiful front door in one of the most expensive zip codes in Massachusetts. Danger does not announce itself. It hides. And the people it hides from most effectively are often the ones who are trying hardest to hold everything together. I held everything together for too long. I was trying to find my way out. I almost made it. If telling my story helps even one person recognize the danger before it is too late, if it helps one woman trust herself, take one step sooner, tell one person what is really happening behind closed doors, then my voice still matters. Then I am not only a victim, I am also a warning. And I am also, still, a woman. My name was Ana Walshe. I was 39 years old. Remember me. Thank you for listening to her final story.